If you're a coach or consultant with a strong LinkedIn presence, but you're not converting connections into clients, the problem is probably your messaging. You're either not reaching out at all because you don't want to feel pushy, or you're not sending the types of messages that feel salesy, but as a result, you're ending up getting ignored. And then either way, that means that you're just leaving money on the table. But here's really the truth. LinkedIn DMs are one of the most powerful tools for converting visibility into revenue, but most people get it wrong because they either pitch too early or they're just too passive by sending generic messages that don't actually build trust. And when your messaging doesn't work, then your LinkedIn presence just becomes a vanity metrics. Lots of followers, lots of engagement, but no actual clients. Throughout the course of this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to use LinkedIn DMs to convert prospects into clients. And I'm going to walk you through a complete 4-message framework that moves people from first contact to a booked call in a more natural, fluid, value-first way. And it's the exact same messaging framework that I've leveraged to build a following of over 55,000 followers, all organically, with over 10 million impressions to relevant followers over the course of the last year or so. And so with all of that said, let's start with what really the core traps actually are. With the first one being you being too pushy. So this is when you send a connection request and then immediately pitch your services. So it might be you saying something like, "Hi, I help consultants to generate leads. Let's jump on a call." Now that approach just gets ignored or blocked because it feels too transactional. You're treating people like prospects, not humans, and nobody just wants to be sold to by a stranger that quickly with that much intentionality. So you need to be a little bit more subtle and value first in your approach. Now, the second trap can actually be the opposite, really being too passive. So this is basically when you never reach out at all. So you're posting content, you're engaging and building connections, but you're never actually initiating a conversation because you're only waiting for people to come to you. And while some will, most won't. And that means that you're going to end up leaving opportunities on the table because you're just afraid of being pushy. So here's the reality. There is a middle ground, and you can reach out proactively without being pushy. You can actually initiate conversations that lead to clients without feeling salesy, but you do need a framework, really a strategic sequence of messages that builds trust, delivers value, and then naturally moves someone towards a call. So the best LinkedIn messages is really about building relationships, because when you lead with value, when you're actually genuinely curious about your prospects' challenges, and then you offer help without strings attached, people will start to want to work with you. And that's when your DMs can become a real client generation tool. So let's get into what that framework can look like. Now, the first message is really your value first opener. So this is the first DM after connecting with someone. And really the goal is simple. Start a conversation, not close a sale. Now, at this stage, you're really focusing on building rapport, demonstrating that you're genuinely interested in them, and then positioning yourself as helpful, not as salesy. So here's really the framework for that first message. The first step is to personalize it. So reference something specific about either their profile, their content, or their business, and so that this shows them that you're not just sending a generic template to hundreds of people. The second step is to ask about their challenge. So show genuine curiosity about what they're working on or what they're struggling with, because this will position you as someone who's interested in helping and not just selling. Now, the third step is then to offer value. This part's optional, but it's important at the same time. If it feels natural, mention that you've worked with people in their situation and you've seen some interesting patterns, but don't pitch yet, just plant the seed. So here's an example of what this would look like as a whole message. You'd say, "Hey, name, I came across your profile and noticed your specific detail about their role, company, content. I've been working with niche on specific challenge, and I'm curious, what's been your biggest obstacle with related problem? I've seen some interesting patterns working with niche, and I'm always curious to hear what's working or not working for others." Now, let me break down why this works. When you say that I came across your profile and noticed, this is the personalization part. So it just seems that you're not sending a mass message, right? Then the part where we say, "I'm curious, what's been your biggest obstacle?" This is about curiosity, right? So you're not pitching, you're asking, you're not selling. And then when you mention, "I've seen some interesting patterns," that's like subtle credibility, right? You're hinting that you have experience without it feeling pushy. So here's a complete example. You could say something like, "Hey, Sarah, I came across your profile and noticed that you're a financial advisor specializing in working with high net worth clients. I've been working with financial advisors on building LinkedIn authority, and I'm curious, what's been your biggest obstacle with attracting clients on LinkedIn? I've seen some interesting patterns working with advisors in your space, and I'm always curious to hear what's working or not working for others. So can you see how that feels? It just feels conversational, right? It's curious, it's helpful. There's no pitch. It's just you're starting a conversation, right? And so really what you're trying to do is open a door. You're not focusing on closing the sale. And as a byproduct, you're building rapport and then positioning yourself as someone who's genuinely interested in their challenges. Now, then the second message is actually where you deliver value. So this is your response after they reply to your first message. And really the goal is simple. Give them something useful without asking for anything in return. This then builds trust and positions you as someone who's genuinely helpful. So here's the framework for the second message. The first step is to acknowledge their response. So thank them for sharing their challenge. Show that you're actually listening. The second step is to deliver a quick, actionable insight. So share a specific tactic, a framework, or a perspective that actually addresses their challenge. So make it immediately useful. Don't hold back. Give them actual, real, helpful value. The third step is to keep it conversational. So you don't want to pitch yet, just be helpful. End with an open-ended question or an invitation to continue the conversation. So here's what the template would look like for this, right? You could say something like, thanks for sharing that name. That's a common challenge I see with niche. Here's one thing that's been working really well, and then offer your specific tactic or insight, and then a brief explanation as to why or how to implement it. Then you'd say, curious, have you tried anything like that, or is this a new approach for you? So let me break down why this aspect works really well. When you say thanks for sharing that, it's just an acknowledgement. You're showing that you've listened. And then when you say, here's one thing that's been working really well, that's your value delivery. That's when you're giving them something actionable. Then when we mention curious, have you tried that? That keeps the conversation going without you actually pitching. So let's talk through this as if it was a complete example now, right? You could say, thanks for sharing that, Sarah. Attracting high net worth clients on LinkedIn is definitely a challenge most advisors face. Here's one thing that's been working really well, positioning your LinkedIn headline around a specific outcome instead of credentials. For example, instead of certified financial planner, try instead, I help high net worth families protect and grow generational wealth. That immediately communicates who you serve and what outcome you deliver. Curious, have you experimented with outcome focused positioning before, or is this a new approach for you? Again, can you see how that feels? It's like you gave her a specific actionable tactic. You didn't pitch your services. You didn't ask for a call. You just helped. And that can then build trust, right? Now, when we move on to the third message then, this is really where you want to deepen the conversation. So this is your follow-up after they've responded to your value delivery. And really the goal here is twofold. You want to qualify them as a good fit and then build deeper trust by continuing to be helpful. So here's the framework for message number 3. The first step is to acknowledge their response. So if they tried your tactic or found it helpful, then acknowledge that, right? Because if they have follow-up questions, you then want to answer them. The second step is to ask a qualifying question. So this is where you start to understand if they're a good fit for your services, but frame it as curiosity, not as interrogation. The third step is to offer additional value. So if it feels natural, share another insight or resource. Keep being helpful. And here's the template for going about doing this. You can say words along the lines of, glad that resonated, name, I'm curious, qualifying question about their situation, goals, or challenges. The reason I ask is brief explanation of why it matters. And then you could potentially offer an additional insight or resource. So let me break down why this works. When you say I'm curious, you're still asking, you're not actually selling. And then when you say the reason I ask is, you're explaining why the question matters, which then builds trust. And then you could potentially offer additional value, which means that you're just continuing to be helpful. So now let's talk about the complete example here, right? We could say, glad that resonated, Sarah. I'm curious. Are you currently posting content on LinkedIn, or is your profile more of a passive presence right now? The reason I ask is that outcome-focused positioning works best when combined with strategic content that demonstrates your expertise. So if you're already posting, we can talk about how to align your content with your positioning. If not, there's a simple 3 posts per week framework that works really well for other advisors. Again, notice how that feels. You're basically asking a qualifying question, which is, are they posting? But you're framing it as helpful, not as an interrogation. And then you're offering additional value based on their answer, right? Now, the fourth message is then when you invite them to an actual call. So this is the moment that where you've basically been building towards, and the goal is to make the invitation just feel natural, helpful, and low pressure, because again, you're not pitching, you're offering to help them to solve a problem. So here's the framework for message number 4. The first step is to acknowledge where they are. So reference something that they shared in a previous message because it shows you've been listening. The second step is to frame the call as helpful, not as a sale. So position the call as an opportunity to walk them through strategies, to share insights, or to answer questions, not as a sales pitch. This third step is to make it easy to say yes. So provide a calendar link and keep the time commitment short, like 15 to 20 minutes. So here's what the template would look like for something like this. You could say, based on what you've shared, name, it sounds like summary of their situation or challenge. If it's helpful, I'd be happy to jump on a quick call and walk you through specific outcome or strategy that's been working for niche in your situation. No pitch, just a conversation about what might work for you. Here's a link to grab 15 minutes if you're interested, and then calendar link. Now, let me break down why this works. When you say based on what you've shared, you're referencing the conversation, which means it doesn't feel like a cold pitch. Then when you say if it's helpful, you're framing it as optional and helpful, not mandatory and like a sale. Then when you say no pitch, just a conversation, you're explicitly removing the sales pressure. And then when you say here's a link to grab 15 minutes, you're just making it easy and low commitment. So here's what the full example would look like in this particular case. You'd say, based on what you've shared, Sarah, it sounds like you're in a great position to build LinkedIn authority. You have the expertise. You just need clear positioning and content strategy. If it's helpful, I'd be happy to jump on a quick call and walk you through a few strategies that have worked for financial advisors in your situation, specifically around outcome-focused positioning and strategic content. No pitch, just a conversation about what might work for you. Here's a link to grab 15 minutes if you're interested, and then you put in your calendar link. Again, notice how that feels. It's not pushy, it's not salesy, it's just a natural next step in what has been a helpful conversation. So if we're to put all of this together as a complete LinkedIn DM framework that moves prospects from first message to book call, the first message is your value first opener, right? So personalize it, reference something specific, ask about their challenge and show curiosity, and then offer value, optional, subtle credibility, right? Your second message is all about delivering value. So acknowledge their response, give it a quick actionable insight, and then keep it conversational. Your third message is all about deepening the conversation. So acknowledge their response, then ask a qualifying question, and then offer additional value, right? And then here's what the whole sequence would look like as if it was in practice. The first message in this particular use case would be, hey Sarah, I came across your profile and noticed you're a financial advisor specializing in high net worth clients. I've been working with financial advisors on building LinkedIn authority, and I'm curious, what's been your biggest obstacle when it comes to attracting clients on LinkedIn? Second message, thanks for sharing that, Sarah. But here's one thing that's been working really well. Positioning your LinkedIn profile around a specific outcome instead of credentials. For example, I help high net worth families protect and grow generational wealth. Curious, have you tried outcome focused positioning before? The third message, glad to hear that resonated, Sarah. I'm curious, are you currently posting content consistently on LinkedIn? The reason I ask is that outcome-focused positioning works best when combined with strategic content that demonstrates your expertise. And message number 4, based on what you've shared, Sarah, it sounds like you're in a great position to build LinkedIn authority. If it's helpful, I'd be happy to jump on a quick call and walk you through a few strategies that have worked for financial advisors in your situation. No pitch, just a conversation. Here's a link to grab 15 minutes. That's the complete framework. 4 messages, value first, no pressure, and it converts, right? And so when you go through that complete sequence, you'll be in a situation where you'll find that leading with value, having no pressure, will get you to a point where it converts consistently. Now, a few things that I do want to make sure that you avoid, especially because these are the types of things that can get you caught in a trap, is the first mistake often I see people making is pitching in that first message. This can arguably be the biggest mistake. They send a connection request and then immediately pitch their services, right? Saying something like, hi, I help consultants generate leads, let's jump on a call. And you can just get ignored or blocked because it's so transactional. So make sure you use your value first opener, start a conversation, don't close a sale. The next thing is being too passive, so the opposite mistake, right? You can deliver value in your first and second message, but then not actually ask for a call. You're just waiting for the prospect to suggest it, but most of them won't do that. So make sure that you use that fourth message to make the ask and frame it as helpful, right? Now, the third mistake is sending generic messages. So this is just like a copy paste of the same message to dozens of people, and it can feel very impersonal and people can tell. So the solution is to make sure you personalize every message, right? Reference something specific about them, their profile, their content, or their business. Only takes an extra 30 seconds, but it can dramatically increase your response rate. And as long as you do avoid these three things, you'll find that your DMs are going to convert at a much higher rate. You'll find that you'll convert much more of your visibility into actual revenue. You're going to build a lot of trust much faster, and you'll attract more premium clients more consistently. And it's the same approach that we've leveraged and I've leveraged to build a following of over 55,000 followers, more than 10 million impressions last year, and over 100 million impressions for our clients as well. And so if you are someone who values speed and time to result, you'll need a system that basically has a full LinkedIn media engine behind you, a done for you system that really positions you as the go-to expert and then can fill your calendar with qualified calls. Again, the same engine that we leverage for our clients to get them thousands of followers in a lightning quick time frame, and also millions of impressions in front of their ideal prospects that actually have the capital to invest. So if you want a completely free breakdown of what it looks like to put yourself in a position where you can get 4,000 followers in 30 days or generate all of these types of profile views and insights, then all I need you to do is comment the word messaging below on this video, and I'll get a completely free breakdown sent over to you. So again, comment the word messaging below. I'll get that completely free breakdown sent over to you to then put you in a position where you can start to ramp up and scale your efforts much, much faster. With all of that said, I hope you found the video helpful and useful, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one.